I'm Jonathan Green and welcome to this week's Car File. Now each week on the series we take a look at specific groups of cars in our 5 Car File categories: performance, style, handling, value for money and practicality. And this week we're looking at Roadsters. At some time in our lives it's something we all aspire to. Driving a drop top on the country roads, wind in your hair, feeling the tarmac inches below you. And whilst Roadsters used to be the toys for the rich and famous, there's now plenty around that are affordable and practical for everyday use. Or as a second vehicle for fun at the weekends. So, for our 3 test vehicles this week, we've chosen the VX220 from Vauxhall, the MR2 from Toyota, and the latest MG TF. The first car we're going to drive is the Vauxhall VX220. First shown in 1999 at the London Motor Show, it offers a more civilised drive than the car it shares its chassis with, the Lotus Elise. Although the car is built by Lotus at their Hethel factory, the VX220 definitely had its own identity. In fact, 90% of the parts used are purely Vauxhall, including the engine, which is the biggest of our 3 test cars, a lovely 2.2 unit. Well, first impressions of the VX220 is that it really is the ultimate boy racer's roadster. It feels like a racing car. It's low to the ground, tiny little steering wheel made by Momo, another racing touch, and a real racing seat. You get your shoulders in, and you really can imagine yourself going down the Mulzar Straight in the middle of Le Mans. Well, in terms of the gearbox, well, again, it's a bit like a race car. It clunks through the gears. But rumour has it they've kept the Vectra gearbox, and that's where Vauxhall have won out. It's very smooth power delivery, and although it clunks through those gears, it doesn't feel that way. The same with the acceleration and the braking. You can accelerate hard, but it doesn't jolt you back. And likewise, under braking, it isn't a jolt forward like it would be, I suppose, in a racing situation. It really feels quite smooth. But in terms of its handling around the corners, it's perfect. Interior, once again, very minimal. It's again like a race car. But if you're a gadget freak, well, this isn't the car for you. There's no gadgets to play with on the car itself. The buttons that they've got are very simple. And in fact, even if you were a gadget freak and you brought your own gadgets like your mobile phone or your PC, there's nowhere to put them. In terms of the exterior of the car, well, at first I wasn't actually over keen, but really it does grow on you. It's a real head turner. Everybody notices it wherever it is, whether it be in the town or down the country roads. There's only 3,000 of them made each year, and that's another reason why perhaps this will be something quite special if you did invest into it. At just under 23 grand, it's the most expensive of the cars that we're testing today. But having said that, it's certainly worth it. It's got a lot of things packed into it, and it's designed, as we said before, to be the ultimate boy racer's roadster. It might be a little bit tough on some people. As I said, the chassis is very hard. You feel every bump. It's not easy to get in and out of. The roof's a little bit fiddly compared to some of the other Roadsters. There are a few blind spots. It's not easy to see out of the back, and there's certainly a blind spot over the right-hand shoulder. Over a long period around the M25 or down the M1 for 5 hours, this wouldn't be the car I'd be driving. Having said that, in short spurts, this car has everything a Roadster wants. The Vauxhall VX220 at just under 23 grand is the most expensive of our 3 cars, but I reckon it's worth it. The 2.2 litre engine is excellent, has bags of power and a good top speed. With 0 to 60 in a smidgen over 6 seconds, it rivals some of its more expensive counterparts, and it's also not going to break the bank insurance-wise. And if you can see past the fact that it's not got a Lotus badge on it, then you've got a great little car. There's no doubt about it, the VX220 is every bit a high-performance roadster. And though it's more refined than the Lotus Elise, it's still not the easiest of cars to get in and out of. And is perhaps still a little bit raw for some people's tastes. But that's where the MR2 comes in. At around £5 cheaper than the VX220, it's certainly a car that's going to appeal more to the wine bar connoisseurs than the track day aficionados. But that's not to say that it isn't a true sporting roadster. And you know you won't be having any premature garage stops or any reliability problems of the Roadsters of old. Why? Because it's got that Toyota badge. Now compared to the VX, this is really chalk and cheese. The VX220 was fast, pacey and real seat-of-your-pants stuff. This, well, it's the opposite. Yes, it does 0 to 60 in less than 8 seconds, and it's quite talky. But for the rest of it, it's rather dull and uninspiring. That's not to say it doesn't feel like a roadster. It does, it's just, I don't know, a little bit flat. The overall ride is comfortable, but there's very little feedback from the steering wheel, and you just don't feel as confident as you might do in other roadsters. It's a bit spongy to actually steer through the corners. The engine is another 1.8 variable valve unit, just like the MGF we're going to try, but there's nothing really special about it. The engine sound isn't that impressive, and it's a little bit dull in its response. And that dullness is carried over to the styling. From the outside, again, it's not overly impressive. On the inside, it's very unimpressive. It's very simple and very plasticky. It just has no sense of occasion. I think when you're buying a Roadster, when you're investing upwards of 20 grand, you're expecting something just a little bit more special and a little bit more effort to be put in. Toyota, I think, could have tried harder. Why, oh why, when they designed this particular car, didn't they make it like the old MR2? That was gorgeous. When you look at the performance figures of the MR2, it does fare well. Good 0 to 60 time, fantastic fuel consumption, and low insurance will all appeal in this price bracket. But it's the looks and overall flair that let it down. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Bring back the old MR2 style, which really was fabulous. Well, despite all those negative points, I'm actually more impressed with the MR2 than I thought I would be. Okay, it can't compete with the VX220 in terms of performance, style and excitement, but then again, it's cheaper, it's well built, and it still does have a reasonably sporty feel to it. But there's one thing that's in no doubt. When the sun's out, you can't beat any car in town without a roof. But sadly, in this country, we're not blessed with good weather all year round, and it begs the question, just how much call is there for Roadsters in the UK? Well, we put that question, and many others, to our men in the know, the car salesman.
I think there's a great deal, of course, for Roadsters in this country. The weather supposedly is getting warmer. When we do have the warm weather, there's nothing nicer than having the roof down on a car. And the cars are becoming ever more accessible. Price-wise, the MR2 Roadster now is available from around £17,000, which is a tremendous car. And, you know, as such, we're doing great business on them.
A closer run into the convertible in the glamour stakes is the coupe, but which to our experts feel has the greater appeal.
I personally think the Roadster, soft top, you know, wind through your hair, can't beat it.
Personally, I would say that the Roadster has a slightly more glamorous image than the coupe car, just because it looks so nice when the roof is down. Practicality-wise, there's no difference either. The cars are so well insulated now, and there's no road noise particularly. The chassis is incredibly robust now on the Roadster cars, so personally speaking, I'd sooner go for Roadster, but horses for courses.
Well, we've all heard some of the perils that you can experience when owning the more exotic sports cars, but can we expect a long, trouble-free life from our cheaper Roadsters?
I think the only cars that are seen as difficult temperamental are the very high-priced Lamborghinis, Ferraris. The lower end of the market is much more manufactured for more prolonged use, everyday usage, so it's built for that particular purpose.
Now, before you go and get yourself a drop top, why don't you wait till part 2 when we'll be showing you the last of our car tests, the MG TF. And Richard Hammond will also be looking at an alternative specialist car, the Honda S2000. Join us soon. Welcome back to Car Fire, where this week we're looking at Roadsters. Now, we've already tested the VX220 from Vauxhall and the MR2 from Toyota. Now it's the turn of the MG TF. The version we've chosen is the 160, 1.8 litre VVC. It's the mid-range price of the 3 cars that we've chosen. Now, in terms of MG, of course, the name of MG is synonymous with Roadsters, and they go back to the early 50s, so this little car has a lot to live up to. But I'm glad to say it really does. When I first saw the plastic veneer wood finish, I wasn't over impressed. I suppose we're used to seeing the old MGBs with the real wood and the real finish. But actually, they've come away with it well, and it does actually add a classy look to it and a more sporty feel to it. The TF is a lot more aggressive than the MGF. Its styling is so much more aggressive, and likewise, the drive is the same too. There's been a definite effort in making this a lot more of a responsive car, and I think, all in all, they've come through and made it so. There's been a revised suspension to the TF compared to the MGF, and you really can feel it. It's a lot more rigid, a lot more taut and responsive. Not quite as throwing you around as the Vauxhall. In fact, it's a very easy ride. It feels good to get round the corners, but it's not hard work. The gearbox, likewise, is easy to get through those gears. Some have said that the steering perhaps lacks feedback, but I don't find that. It depends what you're doing with it, of course. If you're out on the country roads like this, it's absolutely fine. You're not going to be ragging it around the track all the time. And in terms of long distance, well, that's when it really comes into its own. It's a comfortable car. You can quite happily go down the motorway in this particular car for hour upon end and not really worry about it. Yeah. The 1.8 VVC engine does 0 to 60 in just under 7 seconds, but it actually feels slower than that. It needs a little bit of coaxing, but the engine sound is very sweet indeed. All in all, I'd have to say that I think MG have got the balance just right for this Roadster. It follows the traditions of what's come before it, and in terms of comparing it to the MR2, well, it's a little bit more responsive than that, but perhaps compared to the Vauxhall, it's not quite so sudden. It's not going to rattle your teeth out, but you're not looking for that from the MG. It's a classy ride, it gives you everything you want, and for a Sunday afternoon out with the top down, what else can you want? We don't stop. We don't stop. Yeah. Performance-wise, the MG TF is a stormer. Sub 7-second 0 to 60, good fuel consumption and reasonable insurance. Combine that with the under 20 grand price tag and a heritage that any sports car manufacturer would be proud of, and you have a great Roadster from the MG family. And as it shares a lot of parts with the successful MGF, reliability is not a question. Well, I like the MGF and I like the TF too. It handles well and drives well, and although the smaller engines of the 1.6 may be a little bit flat, this, the 1.8 VVC, is a cracker. Well, that's it. All our 3 Roadsters tested just in time for the British weather to do its worst. And at the end of the programme, we'll have all the scores on the cars. But before that, Richard Hammond takes a look at our alternative specialist Roadster.
For our alternative car, we could have been all sensible and just stuck to budget. But hang on, these are sports cars, so we wanted to be sensible. So we threw the budget out the window and went just a little bit crazy. With this, the Honda S2000. In fact, compared to some in this class, the Honda S2000 really is quite a sensible choice, or at least a grown-up one. Just look at it, from every angle with that long bonnet, those taut lines and big fat wheels filling the arches. It says grown-up, powerful, menacing, but not a cartoon sports car. Having said all of that, it is a very long way from being boring. Time, I think, to drop the top. And at about 6 seconds from up to down, it is the quickest I have ever seen. And it is a process just a little bit easier than in the VX220 or the Lotus Elise. At around £27,000, we have gone a bit balmy with the money, certainly compared to the others. But for that money, you are getting a very clever piece of kit. Honda have gone for a very high-tech approach to the Roadster. So yes, we've got a traditional layout, 2 seats, long bonnet, rear-wheel drive, but up front is a very clever engine. It's one of their very clever VTEC units, which means it may only be 2 litres, but it chucks out enough oomph to charge from 0 to 60 miles an hour in 5.6 seconds. Rapid. Most of the power is to be found lurking at the top end of the rev range. And when I say top end, I'm talking, according to this rather nifty electronic rev counter, about 9,000 RPM. That's bike terms. Charging along, sitting almost over the rear wheels with that great big long bonnet stretching out in front. You really do get that proper old-fashioned rear-wheel drive Roadster feel. Ha ha! You'll be using that 6-speed box a lot to just row it through the gears and keep it on the boil. Good news is the 6-speed box is very, very nice to use. It handles almost as sharply as it looks. Almost, not quite. Somehow the steering is a little bit vague and sloppy. It doesn't feel as pin-sharp as, say, the Lotus or the VX220. But we do get a lot more kit on board. It's much more comfortable. I've got leather, a proper interior in here. It's very smart, and it's made by Honda, so it'll last and look the same in years to come. It's a kind of a hybrid. You've got pretty much sports car performance. In fact, yeah, you have got pretty hot sports car performance, but also with a GT feel to it, this luxurious interior, and it's comfortable. The ride is actually soft enough, you could drive this to the south of France, though you'll probably have to send your luggage ahead, because there ain't no room for it on board. Goody storage space. But then gargantuan compared to some of the others we've looked at. So with the Honda S2000, maybe you can have a Sportster that you can convince yourself somehow is both fast and sensible.
No doubt Richard enjoyed driving the S2000 with those performance figures, who wouldn't? It's very quick to 60, and that 2-litre VTEC produces an engine note that even Ferrari would be proud of. Well, if you haven't seen the Roadster of your dreams yet, here's our 3 alternatives to maybe tempt you into the showroom. In third place is the BMW Z3. Although the 1.9 version isn't going to give you the ride of your life, you will get the quality feel you get from driving any Beamer. And let's face it, with this type of car, image is usually a major concern for its owner. In second place is the Mazda MX-5. Although it's been with us for over 10 years now, it's still one of the most popular roadsters on the market, even if most of them will probably spend more time on the high street than on the B-roads. It looks good, is reasonably sporty, but above all it's cheap, at a little over 15 grand. And so to first place with the Audi TT. Yes, we know it's vastly more expensive than the others at 26 grand, but for style, class, quality and looks, it's fabulous. It has the feel of being made from one block of material. But whilst the ride won't keep you grinning like a fool, you'll definitely be smiling with the TT. Well, as you can see, the weather's finally beaten us and we've had to put the roofs up, but it doesn't matter because now it's crunch time for the MG TF, the VX220 and the Toyota MR2. And we're going to find out now how they scored in our car file test. First up, it's practicality. And for this, the Vauxhall scores 2.5 points. It's not the roomiest car in the world, but the boot is surprisingly spacious, and you could easily take enough kit for a weekend away. The MR2, on the other hand, scores 1 point, as there's hardly any storage space apart from a small compartment under the bonnet and 2 towage areas behind the seats. The MGTF gets the most points here, as it not only has the best visibility when reversing, but it's also the roomiest, with a good-sized boot that you could even get a set of golf clubs in. On to value, and for this we scored the VX220 3 points. Whilst it's the most expensive out of our 3, it certainly feels and is more specialised. The MR2 also scores 3, as for its 18k price tag, you do get a reasonably well-performing, well-built Roadster. Top marks though go to the MG. It's got great looks, performance and reliability, and all for under 20 grand. On to style, and for this we've given the Vauxhall 4 points. It looks like nothing else on the road, plus the interior really feels the part. Whilst the interior of the MR2 is a good effort, we feel the exterior lets it down. The MG, on the other hand, gets 3.5 points. They've managed to update the TF without ruining the original car lines. On to handling, and again the Vauxhall gets 4 points. It's superb, very sporty and exciting, yet solid and stable. And so to performance. Yet again the VX220 gets a good score. It's the quickest car of our 3, both overall and to 60. The MR2 gets a respectable 3 points. It'll get to 60 in under 8 seconds, tops out at 130 miles per hour, and has a great fuel economy of nearly 40 to the gallon. The MGTF does well when it comes to performance. The 1.8 VVC engine is great, and though it needs encouragement, it revs sweetly and pulls hard. So overall, we've given the VX220 17.5 points, the MR2 11.5 points, and the MGTF 16.5 points, making the VX220 a close winner. Well, whilst the VX220 is perhaps the most expensive, it's also very practical, and as a drive, it's absolutely fabulous. But I suppose with all 3 of these cars, just a little bit nicer when the hood's down and the sun's out. I'm Jonathan Green, cold, wet, soaked to the skin, but right in the thick of things for Carfile.